Looking for a new true crime podcast to binge but don't have a lot of time? Check out my podcast, Bite Sized Crime. My name is Joy. I'm a school librarian, obsessive researcher, and lifelong true crime nerd. Each week, I bring you a new case to dissect. I focus on the facts, giving exposure to some of the lesser known stories in the true crime world. And each episode is less than 20 minutes, just right for your busy schedule. Get your true crime fix and subscribe to Bite Sized Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen.
Hello, everybody. This is Megan.
And this is Alana.
And welcome to Tea Time Crimes.
Here we are on this fine afternoon. How are you and your cousin Slappy?
God, you're coming in hot.
I am hot.
Literally.
Literally.
Also, Slappy's back.
No! Why didn't you drown him in the river?
That is violent.
Sorry.
He's back. He's back in action. Slappy's back. Slappy's
I'm
back.
sorry for your suffering.
Yeah, you and me both. He's downstairs right now, face down in the couch.
One too many mimosas. Hey there, Slapsters.
Hoping Harlow finds him and gently rips him to pieces.
That's a great idea. Blame it on the dog.
Just kidding. I wouldn't do that to poor Harlow. Because then he'd probably become some sort of ventriloquist dog.
Okay.
I couldn't handle that.
Hold that. No.
How are you doing, though?
A little warm. It's a little warm down here in New Orleans. We're in a drought. We can't burn stuff. This isn't normal. It is so bleeping hot. We've had a heat index of at least 105 to 120 every day, and we're not getting any rain, which is so bizarre for down here. It's the weirdest, hottest summer.
I like how you censored yourself there.
Yeah, I keep it clean on this podcast, unlike you.
Yeah. And are you usually burning a lot of things?
No, but usually this is such a wet state that you could light a tree on fire and it wouldn't spread. I mean, don't do that, but you know what I mean.
Let's not test that theory.
Yeah, it feels like Phoenix and New Orleans are in a battle for the hottest in the country constantly. Wet, dry heat. Go, go, go.
Well, good luck.
I don't want to win this one. I'll take the L.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, well, what do you have for a tea then? Dare I say you have a cold brew?
Well, wish I did.
Oh,
wish
no.
I
Why
did.
would you do that? That would make sense.
If I had thought to prepare it ahead of time, but I've been too bebopping around today. Vanilla pear white tea.
Another white tea, huh?
Mm-hmm. They're nice and light. It's perfect for the afternoon. We're recording in the afternoon today, and it's very out of schedule for us.
She's a maniac.
Rare and exotic with spicy ginger and lemongrass. I made Megan visibly uncomfortable with that one. I could tell.
I mean, I think most people just shivered.
With excitement.
Yeah.
With spiciness.
I'll tell you what, though. Twinnings executives just ran to the phone. And they were like, get this girl on all of our voiceovers.
You know what? They need me for their copywriting, too.
I mean, just from, what's that saying? Soup to nuts doesn't make any sense to me.
Soup to nuts. Didn't someone explain that?
Is that a saying?
Mm-hmm,
is that not it?
No, it is.
As far as I'm concerned, I could have just said from bread to lemons, and that means the same thing to me.
You know what I've really been wanting lately is my mom's banana cake, and that has lemon icing on it. So.
I don't know how I feel about lemon frosting.
Excuse me?
Well, I said it.
Remember when that turned out so well in that cake?
It wasn't frosting, though. That cake that I made had a lemon filling, but was covered in cream cheese frosting.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Give me some of that. Okay, what am I doing here?
All right, are we doing something here? Are we in the middle of something?
I don't know. The bubbles on this tea make me a little nervous. It's a very strange orange residue on the rim. So I don't know what's going on.
Jesus.
Oh
Help her.
boy. Chris isn't home. We don't know. He won't be home for many more hours, so I might die.
Where did you source this tea?
This was a birthday, Christmas present from maybe last year. It's the beautiful the Botanical Gardens inspired tea. I've had another one of these on the show, like maybe
Oh,
9
okay. You
months
survived
ago.
that one.
Yeah,
You survived that one.
it's just an interesting color. Ginger sometimes has the orange, right? No,
Nope.
it doesn't.
Not that I know of. I think that's the turmeric that you say with the extra letter in it.
Turmeric.
Turmeric.
All
That's
right,
it.
we're going in. I expect this to be light.
Like I said, the prequel.
Oh, this is a journey. At first, you're just wading through hot water. And then in comes a little sliver of a body, a little shaving of ginger. And you're just floating along, and there's waving reeds in the river, and it's very nice. And there's clouds, in the sky slowly passing. And it just slips away, and before you know it, you're at the end of the river. But you feel great. It's quite nice. The pear is just that tiny little, like, boop at the start. I think it creates the body and then gives it off to the ginger.
Gotta boop it.
Gotta boop it. Subtle thumbs up.
A subtle thumbs up. I like that.
That was a great tea.
Your tea reviews never stop amazing, surprising, and humoring me.
Good. That's what I'm here for.
You just always deliver.
My job is done.
No.
Your turn.
Well, let me gross you out and bring you back down.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Today I'm going to tell you the story of Florence Ransom.
That's not their last name.
It is. Florence was born in April of 1904.
Okay.
And her father was an artist, a portrait artist. But I
Oh.
don't believe he was super successful at it. And he vanished pretty early on into Florence's childhood.
What?
So nobody really knows any details about Florence's childhood. However, there are rumors and stories. Florence's favorite story to tell was that she was a proper lady and her true name was Iris Cornwallis West.
Wow.
Yeah. Another one in circulation, it was that she was a changeling and a human found her and raised her. Another was that her parents somehow were out of her life and she was left with the nanny and the nanny raised her. We don't know what's true. What we think, and by we I mean the newspapers that I read, believe to be true is that her father probably abandoned her human family and she was raised by the humans that gave birth to her. She's not a changeling fairy.
I'm like, why do you keep saying human?
Because she thought she was a fairy. And her father left everybody and an aunt paid for her education and she was raised by a single mother.
Oh, wow.
That's probably the most likely. But we don't know because she doesn't like to talk about it.
So we could be dealing with a fairy, and I really should have my fairy tea on this episode. Is that what you're saying?
I'm willing to bet you come full circle to not fairy at the end. But, you let me know.
Bet me ice cream.
Yeah, I'll bet you an ice cream. I bet you a bucket of sprinkles. It's a bet I'll always win. So at the age of 21 in 1925, Florence marries a man named Douglas Ransom, hence the last name she got.
Imagine the dresses at this time. They're like swanking around.
Well, I don't think they're very wealthy.
Oh.
So Douglas has a job, but he doesn't get paid a lot. And in 1930, sadly, he dies from cancer.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So Florence is still a very young widow.
Yeah.
And, obviously she's sad about the death of her husband. But eventually she wants to remarry. And this time she wants to marry somebody where she can wear those swanky dresses.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she's hoping for. So she starts going to all these social events trying to find herself a nice match.
Does she introduce herself as Iris? What's her
lady? Hello, I'm Lady Iris Cornwallis West. I don't know if she does. I don't know. She also doesn't sound like Lauren Bacall, but whatever. Is that who I'm thinking of?
Yes.
I think so. So she attends all these big events trying to find herself a good setup. And in 1936, she meets Lawrence Fisher,
Mm.
who I'm going to call Mr. Fisher simply because I can't say Florence and Lawrence for the next 30 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Driving me nuts. Now, Mr. Fisher is 20 years older,
Oh.
which means he's pretty established and wealthy. And
Got some pockets on him.
yeah, deep pockets. They're instantly attracted to each other. There's one problem.
Their names rhyme.
No. Okay,
Two
there's two problems. Mr. Fisher has a wife and 2 daughters at home, which is a bit of a mood killer.
Oh, yeah. Not great.
But Mr. Fisher explains that the marriage to his wife, Dorothy, is over,
No.
which is a very common married man thing to say.
This never goes well.
However, in Mr. Fisher's defense, this appears to be true.
Oh.
Dorothy and Lawrence, Mr. Fisher, were married in 1913. And after the birth of their second daughter, they had pretty much stopped being married. They just lived in the same house.
Not as a man and a woman.
Well, that's what I said, but here's how the papers reported. It's a new spin on it. I don't like it as
Oh.
well, but
What
they
signature?
ceased to cohabitate, though they continued to live in the same house.
That's
Aren't those the same
That's a
things?
cinnamon. It's a cinnamon.
That's not right. That's what cohabitate means.
Yeah. Hey, writer from the 19 whatevers.
Yeah.
Get a new
Yeah.
job. Go work at Twinings. Just kidding.
I'm sure he's very offended by that because he's 107. Yeah, I think that what they were trying to delicately and politely say was they
Yeah.
are no longer together as a man and a woman, but they live in the same structure. Dorothy's like all in on this. She has
Okay.
her own boyfriend.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
Yeah. A Danish man whom they've only referred to as Westergaard.
Westergaard.
Apologies to everybody who is from Denmark. He's a bookseller / publisher, maybe, I don't know, in London. And Dorothy and him, they're a hot item. And okay, this is what we do now.
Is she wearing like a headband like they used to? Maybe some feathers?
I don't know. I didn't see a lot of pics.
Mm.
Still, I agree with you that I always think it's best to make sure that at least that separation is
Yeah.
physically happening. You're not living in the same home as your separated spouse. But what do I know? So Mr. Fisher and Florence, they spend weekends together. The Fisher family has a home in Kent, and they have a cottage and land, and so they'll go
Ooh.
there for the weekend. Yeah.
Very nice.
And then the Fisher family has a home in Twickenham where Dorothy and Mr. Fisher live with the 2 daughters, right? But it appears that Dorothy has her boyfriend over to this Twickenham house, and Florence is over at this house.
Double date.
And I'm not sure the deets on this. Like,
maybe they're just totally cool with it.
is there a game night? Are they having dinner together? Do they just pass each other in the hall in the morning awkwardly? I don't know the extent to which the comfort level is, but it says that they are in the house at the same time and everybody knows about everybody. So nobody's
great.
hiding anything.
That's a healthy way to do this. Don't do it another way if you're going to go right down this road.
Right? Like, I'm not mad at Mr. Fisher at all.
No.
He is
They're doing
he
it
said,
right.
here's the deal, and this is what it is, and you can be involved or not. And Dorothy said it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They've decided and they've agreed. Either way, in 1938, Mr. Fisher decides to move out of the house, which is, I mean, it's probably
It's
time. Yeah. So, because he's been with Florence this whole time, so it's been a few years
Okay.
they've been together. And Dorothy and Westergaard are still kicking it.
Cool.
And space might be a good idea for everybody. So Mr. Fisher buys a farm in Oxfordshire called Carramore Farm.
Okay.
He's moving there just with Florence.
Okay.
Okay. And then once they move there, Florence starts calling herself Mrs. Fisher.
Oh, interesting move.
Even though that's not accurate, she is still Mrs. Ransom or Ms. Ransom.
Is it to like not be scandalous?
Maybe. I think also she maybe just likes it. It's kind of like dress for the job you want
Huh.
kind of vibes is what I was getting, but I don't know. So she's calling herself Mrs. Fisher around town. And I don't know if this is just her personality or maybe part of her trying to put on an air of being well-to-do, but she didn't really talk to anybody in town she would visibly ignore them, not even say hello,
That's not a good way to make friends.
until she didn't. And then she'd catch somebody and talk to them
What?
rambling.
Oh boy.
And so people were a little put off
Oh
by
boy.
Mrs. Ransom / Fisher. But the farm has a staff because it's huge. I have different sources say 100 to 200 acres.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's enormous. So they have a full-time staff, and Florence kind of manages it. That's her job because Mr. Fisher still works in London. So he commutes into London. He's a
Okay.
publisher for a magazine, and he commutes into London. Florence takes care of the day-to-day. But she has the same kind of behavior that she treats the folks in town with is how she treats the staff. And so she either will just ignore them for days on end, and then all of a sudden she blows up over something. To the example given was one day she fired everybody, and then by the end of the day said, "Oh, never mind. Just kidding."
Oh boy, I have a
So,
bad feeling about this.
yeah, so she's a little
Yeah.
she's rocking some ups and downs right now. She's struggling a little bit. She's difficult, so they kind of like to stay out of her way. Now,
Yeah.
eventually, Florence will make 3 new hires to add to the already existing staff there. One for a cowman, so you know what he's pulling on. What? Throwback to last week. Did you want to say it or
It's all
no?
you. I'm giggling too much.
Nah, I'm good. I don't ever want to say that word again. Second was a dairymaid,
Mm.
and then the third was a housekeeper. The interesting fact about these 3 hires is that Florence told Mr. Fisher they were from an agency, but that is not true. These people are actually her brother, her sister-in-law,
No.
and her mother.
What?
It seems you might want to mention that.
Okay, some shady shit's going down.
Like that might come up in conversation.
This is weird.
I don't know.
This is weird. It's setting up for some stuff. I'll tell you right now.
Yeah. So, he bought this farm in 1938. So what's right around the corner here?
World War II.
Yeah. And when that happens, Mr. Fisher decides to sell the Twickenham home, which means Dorothy is going to move to their weekend home in Kent. So Dorothy moves there with her youngest daughter, Frida.
Oh, it's a nice name.
Their oldest daughter is already married and out of the house. And they also bring their maid, Charlotte Saunders.
Charlotte.
Question to the lady in front.
Thank you. Why would World War II cause you to sell your house? First, I bet that's a bad time of the market.
Yeah, it was a very big house. And so I think they were downsizing.
Oh, okay.
It was just the 2 women that were in the house. And so I think they
Yeah.
were downsizing.
Okay.
The house in Kent has the 3 women in it now.
Yep.
And then Florence and Mr. Fisher at the farm. But Frida will visit the farm. Mr. Fisher would commute into London every day. Now, he would often stop by the home in Kent to check on Dorothy and Frida and to make sure they were okay because a war is happening.
Yeah.
And he would check in on them a lot, and he also is supporting them financially.
Okay.
Somebody doesn't love this.
Yeah, it was just my next thing was somebody's jealous.
Yeah, which, she's accepted this open marriage arrangement.
Yeah.
But she doesn't love him swinging by, I guess, without her. And also, Dorothy is refusing to officially sign divorce papers, according to
Uh-oh.
Florence. And she doesn't like that.
What's that movie?
Oh, do not stop talking about Sweet Home Alabama.
Hey, that's the premise.
Gosh. Yeah. Now, at this time, Dorothy's trying to get Westergaard to come live with her in
Oh.
Kent. But because he's not an English citizen, he's not allowed to travel in certain parts that are restricted due to the war.
Oh, shit.
So she's trying to get the paperwork sorted so that he can come live with them,
Well-
and she's having a hard time.
What? Sign the divorce papers and marry him. Easy peasy solution. You know what? They need me as a
Wow.
consultant.
Yeah, be helpful. Dorothy's trying to get Westergaard to her new house. Florence is getting upset that Mr. Fisher keeps swinging by to check on his wife and daughter.
Yeah.
And on July 3rd of 1940, Florence and Mr. Fisher go to Kent to see Dorothy, and they go to the police station and they try to get paperwork for Westergaard. Mr. Fisher goes there for the sole reason of trying to help Dorothy get what she needs. It's not successful,
Oh.
and the paperwork is denied. This is possibly the last straw for Florence, because without Dorothy having a man,
Yeah.
then maybe she's going to want her man, right? Now, when they return, Florence goes out and buys some bullets,
Nope.
and she tells her cowman, which is her brother, that she wants to start rabbit hunting and would he teach her how to shoot a gun.
Oh boy. This is premeditated.
Yeah, big time. July 9th, Dorothy Fisher was at home in Kent. She's starting her day out like any other. At 9:45, the butcher stops by the house, makes a delivery. All three women hanging out. Everybody's good. After lunch, Frida, who's about 19, and Charlotte, the maid, are seen riding a bike along the road by the
Nice.
cottage. Everybody's fine. Meanwhile, Florence, what they believed happened, Florence hops on a train with a large brown package. She arrives to Dorothy Fisher's home that afternoon. She had sent a letter, so she wasn't a surprise, and she was invited in for tea.
Okay.
Upon entering the house, Florence asks Frida if she'd like to join her for rabbit hunting, because this is her new hobby. Frida agrees, and the two head outside. Dorothy follows shortly after. Charlotte stays behind to make tea. As soon as they are outside, Florence fires the gun at Frida,
No.
shooting her in the back but not killing her.
Oh, thank God.
It's believed that Dorothy has seen this and turns to run, either for help or maybe she thinks Frida's dead. Florence shoots her twice in the back. She then circles back to Frida and shoots her an additional 2
No.
times.
But why? If you didn't do anything.
I know. The maid Charlotte is either inside hearing the gun go off and thinking that's normal because they're hunting, or she's bringing the tea outside and has witnessed it.
Okay.
It's unclear. Then she runs and she's shot once in the head.
Wow, that's good aim.
She was very close range for all of these.
Oh, okay.
Florence then steals Frida's bike and starts her journey home. The bike is discovered not far from the house because Florence doesn't really know how to ride a bike.
Okay.
Back at the farm, Mr. Fisher has been in London all day at work. He left the house at 8 a.m. that morning. He spent the day. He got home around 6:45. He's surprised that Florence isn't there because they had dinner together every night. She would greet him at the door and they would eat dinner together.
Dude, she's a nutter.
Florence doesn't arrive home until around 9 p.m. and she's a bit of a mess. She tells Mr. Fisher she's upset because she had fallen trying to save a stray cat that they had in the home the previous few days.
How dare you use that as a pretense?
I know. And that she'd fallen, hit her head, and she'd spent the last few hours laying in the dairymaid's quarters trying to recover. After she relayed this story, she went right upstairs and went to bed. Meanwhile, Dorothy's 80-year-old mother-in-law, Mrs. Gibbs, so this is Lawrence's mother, lives near Dorothy in Kent and loves her daughter-in-law
And her
granddaughter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And every single Tuesday, without fail, Dorothy would come visit and usually bring Frida, and they'd have tea with Mrs. Gibbs.
Oh, sounds great.
They don't show up.
Yep.
So she calls a couple times, no answer. And she thinks that's alarming because usually
Charlotte, right?
Charlotte would answer. Thank you. Charlotte would answer if Dorothy didn't because she's the maid. So Mrs. Gibbs sends her gardener over to the Fisher home around 6:45.
Poor guy.
And she's very nervous. Just to give you a state of mind of where Mrs. Gibbs is at, 8 Nazi planes had been shot down the day before, and she was afraid that a counterattack had happened.
It's gotta be so scary. Like, we don't know because, like, there's never really been war on our soil aside from Pearl Harbor. But can you imagine just living in that braced fear for that whole period of time? It's just, yeah, that's a serious, like, backdrop to this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the gardener goes to the house. He immediately sees Charlotte's body because it's on the pathway to the house. His first thought is that there was an air raid.
Yeah.
And he runs for help.
Oh, okay.
So the police are calling for backup and they're trying to process the scene. They find shards on the floor, which they piece back together to find that what Charlotte had been carrying had been a tray for tea.
Mm-hmm.
But that it had 4 cups and only 3 women lived there. So because of that, they assume that the woman knew their assailant, it was somebody that they invited into the home.
Smart cops.
Now, the house is also in shambles, and so they start to think it's a burglary. The drawers have been pulled out, the contents are thrown, chests in the
Really?
bedroom totally overturned.
Wonder if she did that on purpose.
But once they take inventory, nothing is missing.
Yeah.
All of the women's jewelry is there, money. Now, also during this time, there are blackout periods, which typically means there's no outside light 30 minutes before sunset or 30 minutes after sunrise. So
Yep.
some sources say that it took time to find the body of Dorothy and Frida Fisher.
Oh.
They were in the back of the house in the orchard. Either way, the women are eventually discovered. The only clue they find on the premise is a single white woman's glove between the bodies of Frida and Dorothy Fisher. Now, the autopsies would confirm that all three died from a shotgun fired at close range,
Shotgun.
none of which could have been self-inflicted.
Jesus.
What she said was for hunting, remember?
That's intense.
Frida had been shot 3 times in the back. Dorothy had been shot once in the back, paralyzing her, and then another time in the head.
Oh
Charlotte
my
had been shot
God.
once in the skull. Now, the police obviously don't know what happened at the time, so they're trying to piece together viable suspects. They look at Westergaard, Dorothy's boyfriend. Immediately ruled out, solid alibi. The poor guy can't even, he's been
Right.
trying to get to Kent, can't even get there. They think about Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher also in London working.
Yeah, everybody sees
There's no
him.
way he's getting to Kent and back. So the investigators intercept Mr. Fisher the next day on his way to work to break the news to him, which must just be absolutely devastating. And they return back to the farm to talk to him.
That's so crushing.
And they are surprised to find that at the farm there's a woman also named Mrs. Fisher.
Oh, boy. Here we go. Buckle up, kids.
Yet, now they have a new suspect on their list and they ask the staff about her, not the family staff.
Okay.
Because they don't know that yet. They ask the foreman and he says, yeah, she's a little difficult. And FYI, she recently started asking our cowmen to show her how to use a gun.
Yep.
Investigators are a little confused about the situation and they decide to dig a little deeper. And they start talking first to Mrs. Gibbs. Remember, that's Mrs. Lawrence's mother.
Mom. Oh, no.
Dorothy's
Lawrence's
mother-in-law. So Mrs. Gibbs states that Frida begged her father to get back with Dorothy when she visited in June. Remember, she stayed for 2 weeks in June. And she claims that Mr. Fisher was giving it serious consideration.
But Dorothy's still with Danish dude. Loosely.
I guess once they realized that wasn't going to work out, this was something that they were considering.
Okay.
He had not told Florence that he was considering this because he wanted to
Good reason.
figure out the details. Now, the police were really worried that Florence knew about this and this was the cause for the triple homicide. But Mr. Fisher said there's no way that she could have overheard the conversation because she hadn't been home the day that Frida had come to visit.
But the staff.
Only the servants had overheard, and he had asked them not
Mhm.
to repeat it.
Uh-huh.
Not knowing, he doesn't even know that they are her family.
Dude,
and
it's so messed up.
And she had specifically asked them to listen in on these
Yeah.
conversations and report back to her.
Oh, boy.
So investigators go back to talk to Florence while Mr. Fisher has to go ID the bodies.
Mm.
Now, Florence states that she never left the farm, and the cowman and her maid, they will vouch for her,
Sure they
aka her
will.
brother and her mother. Of course, they're going to check this out, right? They decide to look into it, as well as the people that they're talking to, and it's not hard. They quickly figure out that these people are related to Florence, and it's a super weird discovery,
Yeah.
and Lawrence is flabbergasted. He had no idea.
I'm sure.
And he said that she used to treat them like servants. She never gave any indication that she had any kind of friendly association with them at all.
But wouldn't they look alike? I mean, I guess my brother and I
don't
don't
know.
look super alike, but like next to my mom, could you tell I'm related?
I would never jump to that conclusion if you had hired your brother to be your butler and then you made him call you Mrs. Powell.
He would be a fantastic butler. I'm just gonna
Why
put
is
out there.
that?
He just like he follows orders very well, I think. And he's very diligent.
Well, if you're looking
polite.
for a job, we might have a situation for you. Anyway, this is weird. And clearly, this means that she more than likely knew that Mr. Fisher and Dorothy were considering reconciling. And that gives her a big
Okay.
motive.
That makes a little bit more sense for how like crazy she went.
Yeah. Investigators also remember they have that glove. So
Mhm.
they ask her to try it on, which is
Cinderella.
so O.J. Simpson.
Oh yeah, also that.
What'd you say?
Cinderella.
That's a shoe.
Yeah, but it's the same idea.
And she didn't murder anyone.
Yeah, but it's seeing who it was. Both are
Eh,
terrible ways to figure something out.
I think O.J. Simpson's a better comparison.
But Cinderella's nicer.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the glove fits. And Florence says
If the glove fits, isn't that a saying?
that's because she gave it to Frida. She gave her 2 boxes of clothes when she was here in June to take back with her, and that must have been in the box.
Uh-huh.
Now, she did give Frida clothes. That's actually true, and even Mr. Fisher admits that. But the problem is nobody can find the matching glove, which they think is odd, because if she really had given it to Frida
Michael
and Frida had
Jackson.
been wearing it that day, yeah, unless Frida was the king of pop and we didn't know about it, you'd think that the other glove would have been on her body or near the missing glove. They couldn't find it anywhere in the house.
Well, Billie Jean's
No.
in my head for the rest of the episode. Goodbye.
Well, she's not his lover, so let it go. Florence has the glove fits. She has motive. So the police start asking a few questions around
Yeah.
Kent and, between the farm and between the home and Kent, and everybody has seen her. So many people saw this
Oh,
woman
boy.
that day of the murder.
God, of course.
2 employees on the railway can ID her as a passenger on the train at 8:56 a.m. that morning. 4 other passengers ID Florence on the afternoon train on the way back. One said she had a large brown package. Another witness around 3:30 past the cottage saw a woman matching Florence walking along the road away from the cottage carrying a brown package.
Huh.
Florence at certain points took a taxi, hitchhiked, took a train. Everybody saw her. I mean, so many
Oh,
humans.
boy.
So many people saw her,
This is
and
not tidy work, Floor.
they all gave the same description of her. It described that she was wearing blue pants, described what she looked like. They even brought
Blue
in,
pants.
yeah, trousers.
Wow.
They even brought in,
Aggressive.
a lineup, and everybody was like, that's her. That's the one. So now investigators are really leaning a certain way.
Uh-huh.
They also find letters that allude to Florence's jealousy, as if the situation wasn't a
boy.
big enough leap. You couldn't make it on your
Right.
own. They are actually finding it in writing.
Oh, my gosh.
So July 12th, 1940, Florence is arrested.
Yeah.
Now, in her statement, Florence says she thinks she's 34, but she's not sure because she can't remember her birthday.
Because she's a fairy.
It's true. She states the day of the murder, she was in bed when Lawrence left. She stayed in bed till 2 o'clock or so that afternoon, only going down once around 10 a.m. And her maid, a.k.a. her mother, can attest to that.
Uh-huh.
When she did get up and get ready, she finally made her way outside around 3:30. She saw the lost cat. She ran after it in the garden. She fell, hit her head, started to feel sick, went to the dairymaid's cottage to lay down, returned to the farmhouse around 9. This is her story.
What about all these people that saw you, Sweeney?
She's adamant she was nowhere near the
boy.
Fisher home. And she said that she had fired the cowman's gun previously, but only once or twice at the farm. And she's quoted as saying, "If there is any doubt about me or any suspicion that I was concerned with the death of Frida or the others, I am willing to do anything that is asked of me. I can assure you I am not concerned, and I don't believe Mr. Fisher is either."
I know
That's
it's
a weird
It's the
statement.
language of the time, I think, that she says concerned. I think she means like associated with the murder.
I know, but it is weird though, isn't it? It feels a little
Yeah.
bit subliminal, as if she's
Right?
saying, I don't really care
Yeah.
that they're murdered, except for
I
Frida.
don't care, do
She
you?
seems, I think she actually feels bad about Frida.
She should.
Yeah, she should feel bad about all.
Ah.
She also stated that she didn't care to talk about her life before Mr. Fisher because she had experienced nothing but sadness and wanted to forget all about it,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably very true.
Mm-hmm.
Florence Ransom is officially charged on July 15th. Now, the trial starts November 7th, 1940. She can only be tried for one murder at a time, so technically she's charged for Mrs. Fisher first, for Dorothy.
Okay.
She's saying now, at the time of trial, that she has no recollection of that day, that she blacked out. During the trial, she just kind of sits and stares, just kind of stares straight ahead.
Yep.
Mr. Fisher is called as a witness. Can we pause for a second and say how bad do you feel for this gentleman right now?
So bad. Like his baby girl and his, I mean, he had a really good relationship with Dorothy regardless.
I know.
It's like, that's a
Man.
beautiful thing.
He talks about the setup that they had, the arrangement, explaining that everybody knew everything and, he didn't pretend he wasn't married or anything like that. She understood what she was getting into, and Dorothy knew as well. He states that the night before the murders, he went to bed and he saw shotgun cartridges on the nightstand and the shotgun in another room. But they live on a farm in a huge country. He didn't think much
Yeah.
about it. Just kind of,
That's fair.
I mean, yeah. He went to London for the day. He took the 4:55 train back to the farm and was surprised not to be greeted by Florence.
Right.
Dinner was ready, so he sat down. He ate it alone. She came home just before 9 with the dairymaid, and she recounted the story about the cat. Now, on the stand, Mr. Fisher was asked if Florence knew how to ride a bike because, remember, Frida's bike was abandoned not far from the cottage. And he stated that Florence had asked him to show her how to ride a bike a few weeks before the murder.
What?
But riding a bike is hard, and so she wasn't good enough at it, and she just abandoned it. And I'm not good at riding bikes.
Really?
No. If a bike was my getaway, I would just...
But you have good balance.
Yeah, I'd just give up.
Have you finished Ted
Wouldn't-
Lasso season 3?
Yes?
The Roy Kent on the bike.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. That's absolutely me. I'm just not very good at it. Like when I see a car, I think don't look at the car, and then I go right towards it. Just a total beeline. I can't. I'm not good at it. Anyway, we're getting way off track. Mr. Fisher gives his testimony. Then they start calling up the servants, aka her family.
Does the audience know? Does the judge know yet that they're?
Yeah, they
Okay.
explain that this. So they call up Mrs. Guilford, and they explain that this is. Are you Florence's mother? Yes, I am. Are you Florence's maid? Yeah, yes, I am. Now she said she did not see her daughter that day until 9 p.m., even though she herself arrived at the farm at 9 a.m. because they lived in
shit.
a cottage on the property, but not in the actual house.
She didn't cover for her.
Originally, she did, but then once she found out why she was covering for her, she changed her story.
Okay, so she believes into injustice.
To her credit, which has got to be hard.
Yeah.
So she had been told the same cat story as Mr. Fisher, and Mrs. Guilford asked her daughter, "Where were you?" She asked her later, and Florence told her that she was with her friend Dudley.
Dudley.
And her mother urged her to tell Mr. Fisher, and she said, "No, I can't. Lawrence would not understand." Now, Dudley is Dr. Dudley Benjamin, and he testified later that he had not seen Florence that day. She was lying to her mother. Next, they call up Frederick Guilford, who's Florence's brother, a.k.a. the cowman. He owned the gun, and he had lent it to his sister for rabbit hunting on the 8th, and she asked him not to tell Mr. Fisher.
There you go.
On the day of the murder, Florence found her brother around 8:15 and handed him a note and said, "Give this, to our mother." I don't know if she called her mother, but this is what they said the note read. "Will you come down and see to Mr. Fisher and the farm, and don't let anybody know I am out. Get Mr. Fisher cold dinner and salad and have some yourself. I will try and be back before Mr. Fisher arrives. If not, I shall be back soon." And then at the bottom, it said, "Burn this."
Whoa.
Well, that's what I thought too. But the paper then said all the notes she wrote to her family had "burn this" at the bottom because she was trying to hide that they were related.
Oh, okay.
But the lengths to which she's going, referring to Lawrence as Mr. Fisher, even in a note
Yeah.
to her mother, and then saying "burn this," isn't that fascinating?
Something.
So she hands this note to her brother. Then she says, I'm going back to bed. I feel ill. He doesn't see her again until she appeared at the cottage later that evening. The next day, she returns the gun and he asks, where are the cartridges I gave you? And she says, I had to throw them out, that they got wet.
Mhm.
Now, the sister-in-law, Jessie Guilford, that's a dairymaid, she also has to testify. She said that she did not see Florence until the evening at her cottage after she said that she'd hit her head, but that she only stayed for a few minutes. Her entire family had to testify against her.
I can just see her sitting in the chair, like stewing.
I don't think she was stewing. I think she was in shock.
Oh.
I don't think she was particularly angry. I think she just was, they said she just stared blankly ahead because they started to initially cover for her when they thought she was doing something like stepping out on Mr. Fisher or,
Yeah.
I don't know, shopping in London or something. And then when they realized what had happened, they pieced it together themselves and they weren't willing to cover for her anymore, which is
It's
not
tough.
everybody would do that.
No.
So Florence is found guilty in under an hour.
Wow. That's really quick.
She's sentenced to death.
Oh.
When the court reads the verdict to Florence, this is quote, that she's to be hanged by the neck until dead.
Yeah.
She started to unravel.
I'm surprised they're
She
not doing a
had a
firing
breakdown.
squad, or maybe because she's a woman.
Now objections come in for the death sentence for Florence Ransom because she is a woman. I think at that point you just don't like the death penalty, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just say you don't agree with the death penalty. Stop saying you can't impose a punishment simply because of other factors. Now, the hangman scheduled to do the execution did not want to do it. Stories had started to circulate that hangmen who killed women ended up dying horrible deaths. And there had been several odd coincidences.
Whoa.
Yikes.
That's a rough job. Like,
Yeah.
who does that? You're a sicko or like big bucks? I don't understand who could ever do that.
I mean, I think it's just somebody has to do it. I don't know.
Awful.
At this day and age. The Knoxville Journal said the hangman was so relieved when Florence's sentence was actually changed to life in prison. And this is from the paper. 6 years ago, he sweated for an hour through the ordeal of hanging a woman, and he had taken an oath that he would never execute another of the fair and sometimes deadlier sex. So this hangman was not into it.
Got it.
But he had to worry about it right up until the end because Florence appealed on the state of her mental health.
Okay.
She deteriorated very quickly after the trial. By the time she was retried, she was incoherent. She couldn't even state her name.
Wow.
One of the London papers described her as a white-faced wraith of a woman, a broken doll-like creature.
Whoa.
By the time her second trial came around, she really was struggling. It had also come to light that she had tried to get help for her mental health before all of this happened on several occasions voluntarily.
Huh.
So she clearly had been struggling with something. I
Interesting.
don't know what the diagnosis is. And there's not a lot of a image of her for us to even guess, but everybody agreed that she was suffering from some sort of mental illness.
I mean, you could hear it in that like flip-flop of emotions with the servants.
Yeah, in the way that she talks, in the way that she's trying to hide her whole family, in the way that she thought she was a fairy
Yeah.
or a lady. She ended up being sent to a psychiatric hospital in Broadmoor. And this was done 1 hour before her execution was scheduled.
Wow.
So her and the hangman were sweating it.
Yeah.
And she ended up, it's believed, passing away at Broadmoor, but nobody knows any more details after she was sent there.
Or she disappeared like a fairy, like her father.
Like, there you go. But this case at the time was not widely publicized because it's happening during World War II.
Right. And I mean, the papers are going to be like bombing.
This is such a gruesome and so premeditated. I mean,
That's the
she
thing.
really,
That's the thing.
she had to learn how to shoot a gun. She had to learn how to ride a
Yeah.
bike. She had to send the letter to plan the day that she was going to be there.
Yes.
I mean, she was planning this extensively.
Oh boy. I wonder if she ever, like, we don't know what she had. Were those moments when her brain wasn't being aggressive where she was like, nah, I won't do it? Or was she like set on it the whole time, the weeks before?
I don't know.
But because it's hard, like if we're saying like her mental health was around like rash outbursts, like this is very premeditated.
Very premeditated. And what I think, I have trouble with the Westergaard portion of this because that happened July 3rd, where they were still trying to get
Him in.
Dorothy's boyfriend to Kent.
Mhm.
But Frida had visited in June, and that seems to be the trigger there because that's when she kind of started learning, asking, how can you teach me how to ride a bike? And starting to maybe think about it because she was, I think at that point, she's concerned that he's going back with his wife, but not sure. And then once Westergaard wasn't going to come over, she thought
Right.
for sure it was going to happen. But I don't understand them thinking about reconciling and still trying to get Westergaard over.
That is what is confusing to me too, because like it's clear like they're still continuing to try to make it happen, but maybe it's like you said, like they're like it's not going to work. I mean, think of being in the war in that moment. Who knows when it's going to be over? And is he in Denmark?
He was in London.
But he's not allowed certain parts of the country.
Correct.
Because all the spy stuff that we've already covered in other episodes.
I don't know how accurate that was. They might have just, maybe it's just something his daughter had said, because that's always, the Parent Trap is a successful movie for a reason. That's always something kids talk about with their parents. And maybe that was just something Frida had talked to him about. Some sources say it was the older daughter who talked about it, but Frida makes more sense given the timeline. Maybe they weren't going to get back together. Maybe it was just a dream, but it seemed that the mother-in-law thought they were going to as well. So I don't know. I mean, things can happen quickly. I mean, they'd been together since 1913.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be, maybe it was just one of those things where they just said, you know what, this is a crazy time. We still love each other. We still have Frida.
Right.
Let's just give it another shot. Maybe they just decided on a Monday and that was it. But it seemed to be the last straw for Florence. In addition to not only losing Mr. Fisher, she would, of course, lose the living arrangements and supporting essentially her whole family.
Yeah.
But also it was believed that Mr. Fisher had Florence on several items of his will. So,
oh, wow. I mean, yeah, they've been together for a long time.
They've been together for years. A lot of things would have been left to Florence. And it's assumed that had he gone back with Dorothy and broke it off with Florence, that those adjustments would have been made and she would have been starting from scratch.
What's really the pull? Like, was it love or thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we get such a small little preview of who Florence was. I think that it's the abandonment that is the trigger for her more than anything.
Well, yeah, I don't blame her.
Because it feels like she probably did have a rough upbringing and she never wanted to talk about it. And this dissociation that she did was to cope with it. Pretending that she was a lady, pretending that she was a fairy, pretending she was something other than she was probably her way of coping. And so I'm guessing the abandonment of Mr. Fisher leaving her was the kicker, not necessarily the money, but
yeah, I think that's fair.
I don't know. She started to unravel. And what I always think of this as is that's what guilt will do to somebody who commits a murder and has a conscience and committed a murder for, not self-defense or something.
Right.
It'll start to deteriorate you if you have any kind of conscience. I bet she felt remorse about it, or she blocked it out and completely shut it out and repressed it, which is going to still be in your body, right? Your body's still going to remember what happened. It's still going to come out and attack you that way.
Man.
I tried really hard to find out what happened to Mr. Fisher after this, and I couldn't find anything, and there really wasn't anything on his position. I assume he didn't stand by her in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
He didn't really say anything negative either. He just answered the questions in the testimony, and that was it.
That's
yes, no,
so
yes.
hard. He just immediately lost everything in his life.
They still have their oldest daughter, but
right.
Just throwing that out there. But yes, he lost half of his family in one day because of the woman he
loved. And he lost her too.
And then he lost her too, yeah.
That's terrible. God.
It's interesting to me, the power dynamic too, where you would be the mother and the brother and just allow your sister to...
She was pretty sick with that too. I could just imagine her ordering them around.
Yeah, just to boss you around and
Yeah.
order you around and treat you like you were a servant
Uh-huh.
under the guise of, we have to, or
Right.
Mr. Fisher won't allow you to be here.
Right.
I'm like, really? I feel like he would have been probably welcoming and not
Agreed.
made them work and
Agreed.
just let them live there.
Agreed.
He seems like a pretty nice guy,
Yep.
but okay. It's just
It's a
weird. She
little
wanted
strange.
spies. That's why I think it's the abandonment, because I think she wanted them there so that they could listen in and report back to her so she could be on the know about anything, because I think losing him was her biggest fear.
Yeah. And well, girl, you lost him.
And for the record, I don't think she was a fairy, but that doesn't mean I don't believe in fairies. Come on now.
I'm reading the encyclopedia, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies right now. You might like it.
Is that like an encyclopedia format, or is it a story?
It's a story. It's like it's the person, the scientist who's like going around to these different sites. It's like her journals of her explorations.
Have you ever seen a fairy while foraging?
I have not, but I don't
Not
have
yet.
a trained eye. So
Yeah, you gotta practice.
I'm looking for mushrooms only. I gotta work my eyes on those.
Well, that was a real folklore back in the day. Do you remember that Outlander episode
Which one?
where Claire gets in trouble because she tries to help a changeling?
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? It was when a baby was sick and there was no
Mhm.
explanation, they would
Mhm.
leave it as an offering to the fairies and hope that it would be replaced.
I mean, it's everywhere back in the, like, especially around Europe and the Nordic countries and also like the Irish and Scottish areas. Like that was definitely a big thing.
I know.
Who
I know it's
knows?
not possible, but it's a really nice thought.
You don't know it's not possible.
That's true. I guess I don't. I've never seen it not happen.
Yeah.
But I'm saying
Take
it's a
that.
really nice thought. But I imagine medical attention would have been the first one.
But they can be mean too.
They can be mean?
Uh-huh. That's what I'm reading.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, no.
Well, you have to fill me in. So, what are your last words?
I don't even know. I just wish she had gotten help when she asked for
Yeah.
it. That's what I think my biggest wish is for this episode. Like, it's really cool in the 40s, or I guess it would be the 30s, that she sought it out. That feels unusual for that time period. And it's just, it relates to today. There's so much shame around it still, but I mean, could save a life, could save multiple lives. So,
Yeah. And I bet you if she was seeking help in the 30s, I bet it was very severe symptoms.
yeah,
Yeah. Anything else?
don't murder.
Solid advice. All right. Well, who should listen?
Fairies, maids, mothers.
Gosh, maids
brothers.
again. Maids are never doing well
They're
in these
not.
stories.
They're not. They're not. They're either the killers or they're the killed or they're
Or
the
material
awkward
witnesses.
bystander. Yeah.
Yeah, it's never going well. Like,
No. You're never
if
winning.
I have to time travel, I'm gonna pick anything before domestic servant.
Be a cowman.
I'll be a cowman. I love that.
Love those letters. Let's see. Maybe people who like to ride bikes. Great skill to have.
You don't need it though. Roy Kent and I get along just fine without it.
Boy. And the guy who invented the telephone.
Why is that now?
Because Mrs. Gibbs used it, and that was kind of teed it all off.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can find us on all the platforms at
Tea Time Meta Crimes.
You can email us at
teatimecrimes@gmail.com.
Please rate, review, like, subscribe, send us ideas for teas and crime. And
Get us to 30!
Hopefully we will be back next week.
Unless the fairies get us.
Yeah, I hope they're the nice fairies.
Put out some offerings. Put out sprinkles for them.
Do they like sprinkles?
I'm sure. In this book, they like, it depends on the fairy, but sometimes they like shiny things, jewels, different kinds of foods, sweets.
Am I a fairy then? Because I eat an unbelievable amount of rainbow sprinkles as
You
a
do.
grown woman.
You do. It's impressive. It's one of my favorite things about you.
It's really?
Yeah.
Wow. That doesn't say a lot for the other remaining qualities.
It's amazing.
Alana likes my widow's peak and my love of sprinkles.
Bring
Other
it
than that,
on.
she could do without me. All right. We will hopefully be back. Who knows?
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Ta.